All right. Hi, everybody. Good morning and actually good evening to all our guests in the US. It's very special that we have three guests all the way from the US and from two different time zones in the US as well. So we have three time zones here. Let me first introduce you to Coach Steve Clark. He wears many hats. He was an All-American college player at UC Davis. He coached at many colleges in the US, including Chapman, Texas Tech, UC Irvine, where he was my head coach, and Eastern Washington University. He holds a doctoral degree right now and also competes in the martial art of Subakdo. In addition, I have to mention he runs a very popular podcast called the Coach Clark PhD Show. And in addition to that, he also has a website, steveclarkphd.com, which is a great resource for players, parents, and coaches. And right below him on your screen, we have Erin Blessing. She was a student athlete at Eastern Washington University, graduated in 2018, and is currently a grad student studying engineering. And then we also have Harsh Mankad, who was a former professional player. He had a career high ranking of 222 in singles and 101 in doubles on the ATP circuit, and was ranked as high as #1 in the college tennis circuit in 2001 and 2002, where he played for the University of Minnesota. In addition to that, he's also a former Davis Cup player for India, where he played for many years and played some great players like Leighton Hewitt as well. So everybody, guests, thank you very much for joining once again, and sorry about that little confusion with the time. To kick things off, Coach Clark, can you just give us a brief overview of what college tennis is about?
Well, for me, and I think Erin could say this, it's one of the best times of your life. And I think this video conference right here is a testament to that. So we have people all around the world. It unites people around the world at the highest level. They a lot of times they say, competition brings you together, like you're in the trenches. And so college tennis is an opportunity. It's the most unique opportunity in the world. There's no other place in the world that it happens except in the United States. And I think in Canada they have some version of it as well. But it's a way to combine your academics and your athletics at the highest level. And I have a saying, it's excellence is not division dependent. So whether you're Division 1, 2, 3, NAIA, JUCO, it's the whole idea that you are using your skill sets both academically, socially, and on the court to give it your best. And it's the best time of your life, lifelong friends.
Awesome. And can you just talk to us a little bit about the advantage of using college tennis as a transition to the pro circuit?
Yeah, there's, and I don't say this to tout anything I was doing, but I have a really good conversation with Chris Tantz, who you know.
Yeah, I know Chris. Yeah.
And we talk about this transition from juniors to college to pros specifically. But one of the things that it's particularly for men, and I mean, Erin was she's a fit girl and she worked hard and that sort of thing. But guys coming in younger, generally they need 4 years to develop physically. It's brutal out there, as Harsh can say. When you're on the tour, I mean, it's big boy ball, and it's different than the juniors. And so you need that time to be able to physically mature. More so than the gals in many ways, and even they are more fit these days. So I think physically you need that, and I think just being on the road and the travel and the maturity level and all that stuff, being able to segue from the juniors through college to that, you have mentoring. I mean, think about it. You have quote unquote free fitness training, speed training, weightlifting. Your coaches and people in the department helping you out on time management skills, how to eat properly, all those things. And then one of the things I would say, and I'll just leave it at this, is the whole concept of deliberate practice, which I discuss on my site, is, being able to be more disciplined and focused in your practice what you're doing, and the end game that you're heading towards. And I think coaches can help players do that more effectively.
Okay, awesome. And then, Harsh, just before I get to you, actually, Coach, following up on that, we see some players, they go, they play pro, and then they come back to college and they join the NAIA circuit.
Hmm.
What do you think about that?
You mean are you asking, are they going to college first, then go out and play, then come back?
No,
Or they're just
they
trying the
go.
tour first and then,
Correct. They try the tour.
yeah,
We see a lot of European players do that.
right. Well, I mean, I'm going to have to say my bias is, I think we need, on the whole, we need more Americans playing, college tennis. And, there's a whole subtopic of that in terms of, foreign players taking scholarships from Americans, et cetera. Besides that, let's set that aside. I think, there's some players out there, and I think we're going to talk about this later, but when you're thinking of going from just the juniors, first of all, you have to be able to have the skill set, and Wayne Bryan used to say all the time, if you're not kicking butt in your current age group, you have no business going at a higher level. Well, if you're not dominating the juniors where you're at, if you're not, if you're not able to really go through the college ranks and like Harsh, he was number one. If you can't go through the college ranks and kind of basically dismantle everybody in your way, then the pro tour is going to be a tough deal. So these guys and gals that are going out early, and I think predominantly guys going early, is they go out there. That's a tough road. So I just question whether they do that in the first place, and maybe and NAIA, yeah, you could go there and play, and that happens a lot. You see, we used to call these guys men among boys. They come in, they got full beards, and they're just way bigger, and all these little freshmen running around on the tennis court, and it's like, oh my gosh, that guy's a full man, So that does happen. So to answer your question, it's viable. I mean, it is a pathway.
Right.
But I think, I think predominantly that happens a lot in the NAIA because of the rules differences in the NCAA. But I would just encourage people to get the best they can be where they're at, and college, any of those levels, even JUCO, junior college, all those things are great pathways and segues. I mean, in other words, I would suggest somebody, instead of doing that, maybe spend a couple years at a JUCO that plays a really good schedule, and then see where they go from there. And if they're good enough, they're destroying everybody, maybe go test some waters and then finish college. But I generally, because I'm more academic minded, kind of a fully orbed person, I want people to be fully developed, is kind of go that route. Unless they're just off the charts talented, then that's what they do.
Okay, thank you. And
Does that make sense?
yeah, makes sense. And Harsh, I'm sure you you had to make that decision at some point whether you would go pro right after high school or go to college. What were some of the factors that made you decide to go to college?
I think it's sort of each person's individual situation, but I was in Mumbai, and as I was thinking about the pathway from junior tennis to professional tennis, it wasn't clear to me sort of how to make that transition in Mumbai, because there were some good programs, for junior tennis, but there wasn't really a setup or a training center where professional players were training, sort of a gap there. So as I was thinking about sort of next steps, because my aspiration was to be a professional tennis player, but as last year under 18, I was thinking about that. There were so many question marks. Where was I going to train? Who was I going to train with? All of those pieces were missing, in terms of the coaching staff and the training. Then you add on the tournament schedule, right? Very few tournaments were in India. There was only one or two tournaments. So I had to, I would have had to travel to Europe or the US for extended periods of time to play tournaments. And that takes a lot of sponsorship as well. And that wasn't in place. So I had so many question marks, and I was so concerned about the next step. And then when I looked at college tennis, it was kind of the generation before me, my brother's generation, that had started to go to the US to play college tennis. A lot of the top players from India were going. And as I looked at that situation, it became clear to me that that was going to be a much better option in terms of, the training setup, the structure, the system. I could really see myself improving and making that next step in tennis. So for me, it was a very clear option that college tennis was the only really viable pathway to becoming a better tennis player. And again, that was the situation, 15, 20 years ago. But I think a lot of players are in that situation where they just don't have the pieces that it's going to take to become better after you're 17, 18. And college tennis is just a fantastic setup.
Right. And now that you have hindsight, are you happy with the decision you made?
Oh, absolutely. As Coach Steve said, I echo his thoughts. It was the best years of your life. It was just a phenomenal experience. And not only helped me to become a better tennis player and, play well and represent the university and then move forward, play professionally, but I think also the opportunity that, the education, the world-class education and the system here has given me in life beyond tennis is just fantastic. So it's probably one of the best decisions I made in my life.
Right. Awesome. And which was more enjoyable for you, the pro circuit or college tennis?
Both were enjoyable in their own sense. College tennis, I loved the fact that it was so well organized.
Yeah.
The team that I had around me, I felt so much motivation and inspiration to become better, and there was so much opportunity.
Right.
I feel that as a student athlete, not only in sport but educationally too, there's just so many opportunities that you have. So that was very enjoyable. Professional tennis was enjoyable too, traveling the world, doing what you love, and learning from that competitive experience. I can see how it could have been more enjoyable had there been, if you're from a country or a system where, you have that support, you have opportunities to play some of the bigger events, you've got the training, you've got the setup. I think I struggled a lot trying to do it by myself with bits and pieces, not really having the support. So it was kind of, we use the word, it was a grind.
Yeah.
And it was a tough experience, but still, it was good. I mean, it's good to have tough experiences in life, but yeah, both were very enjoyable. I'm very lucky to have both experiences.
Sure. And moving on to you, Erin, can you talk a little bit about, that decision-making process when you were in high school, about going to college and other options? How did that work out for you?
Well, I mean, I was kind of in the same place Steve's son's. I kind of took some time off of tennis leading into my senior year. And then, it kind of came time where I needed to pick what I wanted to do for college. And I decided I did want to play college tennis. And it really, my mom didn't help at all. It was up to me to kind of converse with coaches and kind of decide what I wanted to do with my education. And I started talking to the head coach at Eastern Washington and decided, it was a good fit. We got along really nicely. I could get the degree I wanted. I think that's something a lot of people need to consider when they're going places. For example, I'm really close with a kid that just went to play at the University of Oregon, and he wanted to be an engineer, but they don't have an engineering program. So it's just like something you need to consider too when like what you want to do scholastically as well. But yeah, it was just a good fit. I got to play college while getting my degree. I was never under the impression that I was going to go pro, but I think that people who do want to go pro but maybe aren't at the top tier level yet, it's a good time to develop, but it also gives you options outside of tennis. Whereas if you just try to go pro, then you haven't been doing anything scholastically on the side, and you have to kind of pick yourself up and figure out what you need to do with your life. So I think that's always kind of been my mindset, is that getting a degree at the same time is really important.
Right. And I think actually, I mean, being a girl, I feel it's almost like a no-brainer, because you have 8 full scholarships. You can go to school for free, you can play tennis, you have coaching, you have training, and 4 years of your best life for free. I mean, it's almost a no-brainer, I think, if you're a girl, I think, and you're an athlete.
Definitely. It was a no-brainer. It was nice. I don't have any debt now.
Exactly.
It taught me, and I got to do what I love and travel. And, I went to a different state, but you get teammates and they become your family in a different state. And yeah, it was really good. It was a good time.
Yeah. Coach, I learned that word from you, the no-brainer.
That's a no-brainer, baby.
Yeah, and Coach,
Your
can you just
education paid
sorry.
off, Renouk, right there. You learned something that 4 years of an education right there. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And Coach, can you just talk a little bit about the recruitment process and you know, things like the timeline that a prospective student athlete has to be conscious about? You know, the SATs, the TOEFL, if you're a foreign student, and now they have the UTR as well. So if you can just touch on that a little bit, please.
Yeah, that's a lot. One of the things I want to mention just real quickly, though, is, and Erin touched on this, the majority, my comments are kind of geared towards probably 95% of the student athletes that are going to college. You're going to have some that just, like Harsh, he knew he wanted to play pro. There's a lot of players, like even Alex Waske, who was on my podcast recently, he was 85 in the world. He didn't know. And the majority of people aren't even at that level. They're thinking, well, I'm not going to go. And so the majority of the people, and they're phenomenal athletes, amazing. You know, a lot of Stanford athletes never, you know, even when they won national championships, didn't go on tour. So it's the type of thing where, you know, we're gearing our comments towards that. And in terms of, I think one of the things I'd like to say to all the recruits I can, whether they're, you know, U.S. kids or foreign, you know, Sri Lankan kids or whatever, be more concerned about the process than the product or the result. Just be process oriented. So what that means is, Dick Gould said this one time. He said, look, he says, I think people do this now, but he didn't even look at players when they were younger. It's like, why? Because guys particularly change a huge amount by the time they're 14 and 18. So in other words, you get a kid, I call it junioritis. You get a kid that's in the 14s and he's kicking everybody. He's just he's just gangbusters, beating everybody. But then they go and play college and all of a sudden everybody else is beating them. Because at the time, maybe they had a bigger stature and they could beat people, or they knew how to just kind of push their way through a match and get every ball in the court and they could beat but as other players develop, they have weapons now, and now they become a whole different player. And so one of the things is for players not to worry so much about, okay, I'm at 12, I'm at 14, I'm at 16, I'm losing to that guy. Who cares? Work on your game. Become an all-court game player. Work on your serve accuracy, work on your fitness, work on your ability to take a weapon and go after it, to shorten points, to get in the net. Work on your net game, for crying out loud. You know, so there's so many things you could be doing, and that's not even including rankings. And so now we go to, let's say, the UTR. And I think you have a question about this later on or something about the UTR, but I'll just say, don't worry about that stuff. It'll take care of itself. So, you know, yeah, you want to play the best competition you can. And the UTR was developed. In fact, I have podcasts with David Fish on my show with that. Is the UTR was developed to actually increase competition, not to worry about protecting your ranking and worrying about playing that person. The whole goal is to play more and to compete more and not worry about it. So I just encourage people to work on their games, you know, not worry about the results per se, and just become better. Now that is the whole idea of just enjoying the game itself. Now, I think you mentioned about the timeline. So what I'm saying is earlier on, they don't need to worry about that stuff in terms of, you know, what are their rankings when they're younger. But academically is another issue. I think you wanted to know about that is one of the greatest water polo coaches of all time, Ted Newland. He was at the UC Irvine when you were there. He used to actually look at recruits and say, did they have a high SAT or a low SAT and high grades? He actually preferred them over people with high SAT and low grades. Why? Because high SAT, low grades were lazy people. They're smart and they just don't work hard. He wanted people with high grades and low SATs because it meant they're not just naturally brilliant, but they work their tails off. And those are the people he wanted. So what I'm getting at is be known for being a hard worker, a lifelong learner, and, you know, do the best you can on your SAT and your TOEFL and all that stuff, but you can only do what it is, you know, what you can do. But work on the process of the game, what you're developing. And I would say one other thing regarding the recruiting is so many kids are worried about where they are right now. Don't don't assume that the way you are in the pecking order of tennis is going to stay that way. It's going to change. Because a lot of teenagers think, I'm here at this level, this guy or this girl's here, and if she gets better and I get better, she's always going to be, or he's always going to be ahead of me. That's not true. You're going to pass people up possibly. You're going to become the better player eventually. So don't worry about that stuff and put all your energy and all your efforts into, getting better, the process, studying hard. Coaches are going to want players that work hard and study hard, have good time management skills. You're going to learn that in college. But there's a lot of gray area. It's not all just cut and dry in terms of rankings and all that.
Okay, awesome. And Erin, getting back to you, I mean, I know you're from Salt Lake City, but then you played in Washington. How did you make that decision, and what were some of the important things for you when you were looking at colleges?
For one, having like an engineering program, having the degree I wanted to go after, and then really just getting along with the coach. I think that's a big thing, and kind of gauging what the team is like. I went out to Eastern and I met my coach and I met the team, and you kind of get a feel for how the coach behaves and what they expect from you. And I think it's important to make sure you're going to get along with the coach and really talk to the teammates and see what the coach is really like, because they're going to act differently when you're there because they're trying to woo you to come play for them. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is it was nice being able to play at a Division I school, but I was mostly concerned with, who I was going to be playing with, and just more on the academic side of like what I could do at the school in the classroom. And it didn't hurt that I got a full ride, like you said. So
right.
Helps to get it paid for. So.
Right. And Harsh, what about you? I'm sure you had a lot of options as well when it came to selecting schools, because you were, I think, very highly ranked in the ITFs at that time. What made you decide on Minnesota? I mean, of all the places you can go to.
Actually, I at the time, I don't think I had a lot of options. I mean, recruiting was still not so savvy with getting, everything wasn't as developed, right? I came to school in '99. So I would imagine now it's, become a big industry, the whole recruiting piece of it. But, Minnesota, I feel like the connection, to Erin's point, I think the connection to the coach, in fact, I was in California the year before I came to college, just training in the summer because my brother was there. And it was funny, I was at an academy training for a bit, Wild Academy in California, and Coach David Getz was trying to recruit my roommate, Nick Rainey, who ended up going to USC. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But Nick was not going to go to Minnesota, and he said, why don't you speak to this guy? He's a good player. And that's how how Coach Getz got to know about me, and we connected. But I think as I was talking to a few different coaches, I felt the connection to Coach Getz was really good. I got a good sense of, his background. He had been a very good player. He was running a good program. Minnesota was a strong team. So I was taking that into consideration. Few other factors, I think, Mumbai being a big city, even though I didn't know much about the Twin Cities, I felt it was a little bit more of an urban environment versus some of the other schools I wasn't too familiar with. And then I think something about Minnesota being unique, I just feel like I didn't know much about it, and nor did any Indian player go there. And it was kind of as different from Mumbai as you could imagine from a weather standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I asked.
That to be interesting. There was a novelty to it that I thought, well, might as well explore it, but it worked out great. And
right.
Yeah, some of the factors that.
Right. And you're still in Minnesota, right? And your wife's from there too?
Right. Yeah. So I met her, and that's, destiny.
Right.
And, but no, it's a great place. I landed, luckily into a great part of the US. I feel like, it's grown a lot. It's a it's got a great reputation, you know, Minnesota, for all the opportunities that are here, business. There's a lot going on, and it's really a great place to live, and beautiful. If you ever visit, it really is one of the most beautiful parts of the world, I would say. So I got lucky.
Right. Uh, and coach, getting back to you, I mean, Harsh just mentioned the Weil Academy. I was there as well, and you said your son was there a little while ago. Now, there are lots of ways that kids can get recruited. You know, one is to go to an academy like Weil, or, you know, other Thierry's, IMG now, or one of those. You know, then there are agents out there, and there's also the possibility of contacting coaches directly. Can you just talk to us a little bit about about that process, and what you think is most effective? How can kids get visibility?
Right, and I think this goes back to even like the UTR, like when you talk about the recruiting, there's some things that are just not in your area, you know.
Exactly,
and
exactly.
you got to find out,
Yeah.
you got to just, that's what I'm saying, just worry about your game. And now with technology and everything, you can find out through networking and people like just right here, you know, kids sending videos out to people, and the networking of the coaches, they can find diamonds in the rough, and guys that, you know, and gals that need a chance. But I guess part of my answer to the question here is everybody has a different path. There's not one cookie cutter deal. And I'll give you an example. And this was on one of my recent podcasts with Alex Waski. I mean, the guy had no idea kind of what he was going to do. And he actually, you know how he came to the U.S.?
Yeah, I
Doink.
listened to your podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. He stuck his finger in a book and said, UC Irvine. Okay, I'll go there.
Yes.
And he was really sold. He really liked, you know, we got it off, hit it off, and he liked the school. Who doesn't, right? It's a beautiful place. And then he goes down to San Diego, and he walks up there and he goes, this is where I'm going to be. Yeah. He hadn't even met the coach yet, John. So sometimes you just don't know. You just, and then he thought wasn't any good. People told him he wasn't any good. He got no support, et cetera, et cetera. Ends up being, you know, a great player, you know, and doing a great job. And so the point is there are different paths, right? Now, so whether that means an academy for one person, I generally prefer, you know, bottom line is I want to hear from the coach of this player, how hard this player works. You can see quickly the skill set, you know, the technical skill set of a player within minutes, you know, just even on a video within seconds in many ways. So yeah, obviously their ability to win, you know, their results matter. But I think a lot of coaches, unless you're in a Power 5 conference way up at the top and all that, you're kind of jostling around looking at different factors. So, you know, whether they hire, I prefer having somebody, if it's an agent, I want to have a good relationship with that agent or that contact person. And I want to feel they're giving me the straight scoop and not trying to high sell me on everything. And you find out real quick what that's like. And, I want them, they need to be academically minded, et cetera. And you kind of know who's pushing kids in the wrong direction. And I would say the biggest thing is I like to have personal contact with the kids. So if they can email me directly, do those things directly. Obviously, sometimes they don't know how, so they hire somebody out to do it.
Yeah.
And then the coach develops a relationship with that middleman or middlewoman or, you know, a middle person. And so that is a viable way. The academies, I just think people need to be careful. Like I know, you know, people, you know, Mark at the Weil Academy, you know, and they're high quality people, you know, and I'm sure there's academies that are like that. But still, I think that's it's one pathway. But I think, you know, for me in general, I like to have more grassroots where you get to, you know, the players out there competing, you connect with their coach personally, and, you know, they connect with you personally, and, you know, you come on the visits and you talk with them and that sort of thing. In other words, there's a lot of these recruiting mills out there,
right?
And they just pump them through and they promise these kids stuff. And I want to caution kids to do that per se. Like, you know, you're the coach of a bunch of kids. Right. So technically you're their representative.
Yeah, exactly.
And but you're not a recruiting mill. You're not going to say, hey, I guarantee you this position at a school. Yeah. And you shouldn't, you know, but you just tell them, hey, work on your game. And I have some contacts and I'll get in touch with this coach for you. And, you know, that sort of thing. So I hope that answers your question. There's a couple different pathways. But I think if they just keep focusing on their character and their work ethic and their game, then any one of those shoes could fit. The academy, going through your agent, the personal approach, or just putting your finger in a book like Swasky, it works out.
No, I mean, I kind of agree with you, because even when I was coaching at LMU, you would get like hundreds of emails from all these agents, every week, trying to sell kids. And then when you get so many, emails from these guys, and everybody, they talk them up really high, you keep wondering, and you question their judgment, and you question what they're trying to do. So that's why I was curious about
what's
that.
important, let's say for example, I'm getting to know Harsh on this chat. So let's say for example, as we connect, and then I connect with you, and you say, hey, I know this guy, and it comes through just years of connections where it's like, yeah, I know this guy, and I know the level, or this girl, and I know the level she was, I know the character she was, etc. That's where the recruiting connections are, not just an agent pumping in. You see some teams, like the entire team has a certain, they're all German, or they're all South African, or they're all I think most people want to have a mix when they're in college, and so sometimes you can sense these pumping mills where they just get these guys coming in, and I'm not a big fan of that, but as you can tell, but I think having a mix and having connection with various coaches and all that, so you can call these people up and say, Harsh, was this guy the real deal? Is he a good player? He's got a lot of potential. He's a great work ethic guy. And he says, yeah, I mean, I'd vouch for the guy, right? And then if if the guy lays an egg, then I put a little check next to Harsh's name, and I go, don't believe it. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Then you say, hey, that happens, that happens. And so it's just turning over a lot of rocks.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And moving on to Erin and Harsh, I guess, Erin, even though you're not an international student, you're an out-of-state student, and Harsh, you're obviously international. How is it like, living in a different state or country? Did you guys experience homesickness, and what about the culture shock? Can you guys talk on that? Erin, if you can go first.
Yeah, I mean, the first semester was definitely hard. I mean, you're basically a baby coming out of high school, and you're just used to being around your support system, So that first semester is harsh, but you have teammates, and, they kind of become your support system. And I feel like you grow a lot in that first semester. You learn how to do things on your own, and you start becoming more independent. So I would just tell people that, like, that first little bit is going to be difficult until you get comfortable in your setting. And I would say coming from a different country would be a lot more difficult because of the culture differences you'll see. But I think once you get past that first little bit, you kind of get used to it, and kind of just things get a lot easier. And it's a good learning and growing period for sure.
Sure. And I think being in a team, like a sports team, really helps as well, because you get very close to, that group of people that you're constantly working with. So being on a team,
you don't come out and be like totally alone. You have people you can at least talk to,
Yeah.
So
sure.
For sure.
And Harsh, what about you?
Yeah, I feel the same. For me, I think it's exciting, right? Coming to the US, to college, it's kind of a dream for a lot of people. So it's just an exciting time, very busy too, fast paced. You got school, sports, tennis. There's a lot on your plate, and I feel like I didn't have much time to really get homesick or any of that. And I think the culture of the team matters. So that's one of the things that if prospective students get a good feel for the culture, the team and the people that you're going to be around, I think that helps a lot in terms of making that transition. So in my case, I think just leaning on my teammates and the coaches, they were all just great. So I felt like I was able to make that transition really well. Including to freezing cold weather. And I'd never seen snow in my life. And I remember it was mid-October and snowing in Minnesota. So, but they helped me through it.
I can't even imagine going to Minnesota, because it's cold for me to go to Minnesota. I played a national tournament there, and you just run from the car to the building. You don't even want to be outside.
And we had lifting at, I think Coach Getz may have done that on purpose, but he had us lifting at like, I think it was 6 a.m.
Was he there?
And I remember having to walk.
Was he there, Harsh?
Sorry?
Was he there?
He may have been there.
I bet not.
But I remember having to walk, and it was you can't walk with your feet. You cannot walk looking straight. You have to hunker down in your jacket, look down, and walk. But it toughens you up, and so those are the things that I think anyone has to get used to. All the changes, and it's fun. It's all part of the experience, right?
Sure. Yeah. And one of the nice things, about the US is that you have so many options. The East Coast is different to the West. The weather in the States are different. Cultures are different, East to West. College sizes are different. So there are so many options, I guess, when a student athlete has to make that decision. I'll just, keep this open. Maybe any one of you guys can answer this, but what do you think are the important factors? Let's take aside academics and the tennis. What are other things that students should consider when they're going to college? Coach, you want to?
Well, I'll jump in there to kind of, and what I find is nowadays with the transfer portal, I think it's really important for people to kind of get it right. Because right now there's just kind of this change all over the place. And what I found was particularly foreigners, they come to the US and they don't know the differences. They don't know,
sure.
They don't know it's Minnesota. They don't know it's Nebraska. They don't know it's North Dakota. They don't know everybody knows Southern California is warm, but they don't know where they're going, and they get there and they're, oh my gosh, I've heard some stories and why players transferred. So I would say they get enamored with, with these, a scholarship, or, hey, I'm good, I'm getting a scholarship and all that. And they don't really understand the process. Right. And then they have an agent back home saying, hey, I got you a scholarship. Well, but it's in the middle of nowhere, and the guy or girl doesn't. So I would say the biggest thing for me, that when you asked about, what should they consider, as Erin said earlier, you got to feel a connection with the coach. And like you say, coaches are always going to put on their best thing, like just right now, we're all nice and friendly, on a video, but, coaches are going to do the same thing. You got to have a pro-con list of what are the absolutes that you have to have. Like somebody may say, I am not going where it's cold, or I don't like dry heat. I prefer, whatever. They got to have that list, and kind of use that as their matrix, right? And then when they're talking to the coach, they got to understand, is the schedule important? Is playing high on the team important? Do they want to play at all? Do they want to, are they going to be so high they're not going to develop? Is the conference strong? Are they going to, in the school, the conference may not be strong, but do they play a good national schedule? Like when I was at Irvine, our conference was pretty good. We usually had, numerous teams ranked in the top 50, but we'd also play Stanford, UCLA, Georgia, USC. And so we had a really high national schedule as well. And I purposely did that. Yeah. So they have to understand kind of what they're going to do, how they're going to develop, right? But I would say the biggest thing, and my little piece here is, and I've had a lot of players, but I'll give you an example of one girl in particular. She was wanting to go to school, and she said, well, I could go here and walk on, and I can go here and get a scholarship, but I don't want my parents to have to pay the difference. And I said, look, your parents are going to do what's best for you. And if they can do it, they're going to take sacrifices. That's what parents do. And I said, they want you to be happy. So if you can, and think about it though, you're going to go walk on and they're going to pay the difference. It's going to be the same as if you went to a more expensive school and they gave you only 50%. So sometimes players have to understand, don't be wooed by the percentages and the dollars. Look at the long run and say, look, okay, what do I actually have to pay out of pocket for this school and this school? And don't worry about feeling the ego of a higher percentage for the guys. Girls get full rides, but for the guys, you might get 50% at one school and 80% at the other, but the 50% actually is a better fit for you. And financially, it's the same. So you really have to think through those things and say, look, do I enjoy the area more, the coach more? Okay, I got the 80% here, that makes me feel good. But bottom line is, I can go someplace and get maybe even more money at 50% because the cost of living at that area is lower. Or let's say it does cost you a little bit more. There's sacrifices in everything we do in life. And sometimes you got to go with the place you really feel a connection with and you know you can develop, and just not worry about that so much if it's possible. Now, some people it's just an absolute monetary issue. So.
Yeah. Well, I kind of had a similar experience as well, Coach. I know you know this.
Yeah.
I transferred from this school in Maryland. It was called Mount St. Mary's University. Very, very small school. I think like 1,800 kids. And it was in the middle of nowhere, absolute nowhere. It was surrounded by peach farms and forests, and bitterly cold, and there's no way to get out of the campus. I didn't have a car as I went there. And it was not a pleasant experience, and I too had never experienced snow like that. I'd seen snow on the ground, but never really experienced days of snow. And it was really rough. So that's what made me transfer out. And like you said, a lot of international students aren't aware. And my perception of the US is completely different because what I'd seen in the movies, And so
you see California and New York, and that's
exactly. You see California, New York, maybe Vegas, in some of the movies.
Yeah.
And you show up at this place that's like out in the middle of nowhere. So so that that's why I actually asked the question. And Coach Clark, this is actually sorry.
Just one point.
Yeah.
Just one point on that note. Is asking good questions, I think, to the coaches too, and I think players could gain from having some good mentors or someone guiding them. But in terms of what Coach said, thinking of the long term, I completely agree. And then to be able to assess what's the right fit, I think you got to ask the right questions of the coaches to understand their program, to understand the culture. And I think sometimes people maybe are not sure what to ask. It's sort of an interesting relationship, right? For the player or the family, they're looking for an opportunity. They're looking for, scholarships or so forth. And then the coaches are oftentimes in a position where, they are selecting those players. So, but I think even for the player and family to be able to ask some questions and try to understand, the coaching culture or methodology and all of these things becomes important. So I think having some guidance around that in terms of what questions should you ask, how do you ask them, how do you learn more? I think maybe sometimes I'm not sure, I myself didn't maybe know enough, right? So
I would also say, like, here in Utah, we have a school called BYU, and they're pretty well ranked and stuff, but they're very religious, and it would be like really jarring for a lot of people to come and like be in that school. But if you don't research the school before you go there, you're not going to know. You're just going to come and they're going to have all these regulations that you're going to be like, whoa. And so it's just, you need to research the school before you go there for sure.
Right, for sure, yeah. And I know BYU is a Mormon school. A lot of people, for example, in this part of the world, you don't get too many Mormons in,
and even if you do, they're not the same. It's a different culture here.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? So unless you really do your research, you wouldn't really know what you're kind of getting into. So
let me just point something out, and it's related to what Harsh said and Erin said earlier, is sometimes your majors, the average college student, a lot of people don't understand this, particularly coming from Europe. I would say they tend to be more pragmatic in the way they approach their academics. For example, I remember Alex saying he wanted a business degree, and at Irvine, we only had economics.
Yeah.
But if you knew that, I'd say 90% of my players, and them, Renouk, these guys are heads of businesses, own businesses, are very successful, and they got an econ degree. In other words, what a lot of people don't understand is your degree does not define your future. And a lot of times I think they restrict themselves to a name of a degree.
Well, unless you're an engineer.
Right. See, but engineering, and though they're very specific, but a lot of degrees aren't. And so what happens is they come in, they say, I want to do X here. But what they don't understand is that most student athletes change their major 2.5 times in their time there. So to limit yourself to a school because they don't have a major, unless you're very specific and you know exactly what you want to go with fluid dynamics, that's where you're going, you know. If you want to be a civil engineer, that's where you're going. So I think just knowing that too helps you, opens up more doors for players.
Yeah, but a lot of kids, when they go to college, they really don't know what they want to do, you know.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's another reason why the US system is so good, because it's flexible and you can kind of pick your major when you're a sophomore, you know, and you can take a bunch of other classes as well, especially at the start. So I think that's, you know, that's another real advantage as well. Yeah. And yeah, just moving on, my last question, actually, Coach, this one is for you. So let's just take this scenario. Imagine there is a player, he's pretty good, you know, maybe like a ATP or WTA 500 player. And he's good, but not good enough to make a living out of playing, you know, like a top 100 player. And comes to college, and then, you know, in his junior and senior year, there'll probably be other peers who are doing lots of internships, you know, and going for lots of interviews and stuff like that. Whereas this kid would probably be on the court training or, you know, playing matches, and they might miss out on an opportunity. And if you look at a lot of Wall Street or Main Street, you know, companies, they're always looking for guys with really good internships. What do you think about that? You know, how do they, you know, how do student athletes kind of compete with these guys after college if they're not really interested in going pro?
Well, I think Erin and Harsh can chime in on this too, because they both exemplified kind of, you might say, both ends of it. Is if your average student, they gain an advantage by going this route, right? So non-student athlete, you know, gets internships, et cetera, which isn't to say a tennis player particularly, tennis players generally tend to be in the higher GPA sector anyway. Yeah. So they tend to be more upwardly mobile in their academics, and so in general they're going to do well. But I think that it's possible for them to do an internship during the year. It's possible if they want to do something like that, and during the summer while they're playing tournaments. It just depends on how flexible the internship is. But what I would like to say is, in general, I think this goes back to the coaching philosophy and the department philosophy. If they're all about winning and they expect their players to play ITFs and tour circuits in the summer, and that's the expectation, then that's what the player does, and that's what they're expected to do during the summer. But the other thing too is, depending on where you go, the coach can be generally very well connected in the business community, because that's the nature of tennis. So like at Irvine, we had connections all over the place, and most of those players got their first jobs from those people, and they actually stayed local and got their internships, got their jobs, and that's kind of where they made their segue into the business world, whether they went on the tour or not. So like Harsh went and played in the tour, now he's got his own thing going in Minnesota. Trevor went and played he was number 3 in the world, Trevor Kroneman, in doubles. And now, he's done some college coaching, and now he's involved in, running the juniors in the USTA in the Southern Cal. Or you have, Neil Grover, who didn't go on to play pro, but now he's, CEO or actually he's president of Indy.com, and he was CEO of Future 500 companies. So you have this whole range of people, but how did it start? They all had sponsors or business connections in college. And I actually think that's part of the tennis experience, is you're getting to network with these people because of the socioeconomic status of tennis. And so it's great to have an internship, but I think if a coach is well connected and actually connected with the athletic department who supports that, they're out there in the community getting to meet people. And I think those tennis players will kind of have a natural segue into the business world or professional, or like, right now Erin's going to get her, she's finishing her master's in engineering, and, sky's the limit that way, but there's different ways to go about it. So.
Right. I think I would agree too. Okay. Like I feel like there's you find your connections, and that's how you can move your way up. I mean, a lot of what I've done is connections. So I had a connection into my master's program, and then I met another advisor who wants to take me on for a PhD, but he also worked at NASA. So I got an internship at NASA this summer. And then, but also it goes the opposite way, like where when you're in school, you don't necessarily have to do an internship, but maybe there's clubs that take less time and you have that on your resume, as well as the fact that you're just balancing playing tennis full time and getting your degree. You can also work that in and say, I'm good at time management. I'm good at working with others. I'm good at a lot of things. So you really don't necessarily have to have an internship. Although I would say if you really want one, then you can probably still work one in the summer would be the best time to do one. You can still play tennis a lot throughout the summer and do an internship in the summer. Right. I wouldn't say it's as feasible, well, at least for me, because you'd have to work at least 20 hours a week for an internship. So right. It wouldn't be as feasible during season, but I mean, definitely it's possible during the summer.
Right, so. Right. And Harsh, what about you? I mean, we know that you went back to school and you got your master's degree as well after playing pro. What's your take on this?
I feel that just following your heart, right? I've kind of done that. And every time I've done that, I've felt good about the decision. Whether, everyone can define success, differently, but in general, I feel, for me, when I was in undergrad, I spent a lot of the breaks, winter break and summer break playing. In fact, when I met my wife, she asked me, what are you doing in the summer? And I said, well, I'm going to be playing tennis. And she goes, what? You're going to be playing tennis? You don't have a job. So we still laugh about that. But, it's just following your heart. And for me, it was about pursuing tennis at that point, and I'm glad I did that. And, I get some questions from players on whether they should go and play tennis or take go into business or work. And I feel if your heart is into playing or giving it a try, why not go for it and at least feel good about that. And then you can, do other things. I feel there's always opportunity. After I played for, almost 8-9 years on the professional tour. And then I came back at 30 and finished undergrad and then finished my master's. So there's plenty of opportunity, plenty of time. And I'm really glad I sort of saw that part of my life through. And, I don't have regrets. So I think, just following your heart.
Let me chime in there because I think it's really important that, Erin mentioned it and is being part of a team, and Harsh talked about this earlier. It is not just, I over the years, I've had to teach players how to have time management skills. I mean, some guys come in because I coach guys and it's like, oh my gosh, you got it, buddy, here's your planner. Back then they had planners, it's like, you got to work your time in here. You got to be on time. I had Renouk, what was my saying? On time is what?
I can't remember.
Early. Early
right.
is not.
Right.
Yeah. So you'd have to be able to tell people or, have them develop those skills. But here's the point. This is what Erin was getting at, is being part of a team that has discipline, you're team oriented, you sacrifice for other people. You're part of a bigger picture. Those things are what businesses want. And so, and not only that, and this is what I tell people, the tennis world is very small. And that's why you want to be a good sport on the court. You always want to be a gentleman or a gentlewoman is like a lady, because when you're out on tour and you want a practice partner, you want to have friends. When you're out, in the business world and you want to pick up a tennis racket and that guy and he goes, wow, that guy's a great guy or a great girl. And so the idea is you build this fraternity and this sorority out there. And that's part of, a lot of people don't have that when they go through college. They have to find it or create it. Tennis players have it. It's built in on it, or athletes in general, it's built in, and particularly tennis because it's a very social sport. So I think that's a huge thing that I think people maybe underestimate, and they think, well, I got to get an internship or this or that. It's your internship, your fraternity, your sorority is that team. And that goes, I've written a ton of recommendations for graduate schools, for jobs, et cetera, just based on that alone. And I've yet for somebody not to get what they're doing because of that. It's a powerful tool, development tool. So.
Well, you won't remember this, Coach, but I remember once we had regionals at Pepperdine, and we were supposed to meet at the parking lot at 6:30. and I had to, bike across from the other side of campus, and I was late. I was late by 2 minutes, 6:32. I remember very well. And you had already started the van, and you were just about to head out.
I would do that on purpose to my players, and they'd be like, "Go!" Especially if they were younger players. All the seniors would be all, "Go, go, coach, go!" And I'd take off, and they'd have to run up to the car. Yeah.
No, this time you're not even playing. You're actually taking off. And I was like 2 minutes late, and so I quickly hustle up, and then I had to tie my bike and get in. And you're like, "Yeah, you're late." And I was like, "Yeah, 2 minutes." And you're like, "Yeah." So 2 minutes is late, but those are, in addition to the tennis, those are, obviously valuable lessons that you learn right through college. So those skills are, skills that kind of stay with you for life, and that's something that I really appreciate. More so than the education, to be honest. I think like the life skills that you pick up during those college years are the most valuable. Like the education, I'm sure I could have even got that here, but what I learned living alone, away from family, and having to do everything on my own, manage my own finances and stuff like that, really kind of matured me and made me into a man, I think. So, yeah.
Great.
So, well, with that said, I just want to thank you all for taking the time. I mean, if you guys have something else to say in closing, that would be great. But thank you so much for taking the time. I know you guys are all busy in different ways. So, yeah. Anything, guys?
It was a pleasure.
No, that was nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Erin. I really appreciate your time, and good luck with your engineering program. When are you scheduled to graduate?
Well, it's kind of up in the air right now. I'm just finishing my thesis, but we can't go on campus, so I don't know. Sometime soon.
Okay. Yeah, we just came out of a 2-month lockdown, so we're just starting to open up. And on Monday was the start of phase 1, and I run an academy here, but we're still not allowed to start any sporting activities. So yeah, hopefully that'll be soon.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
Well,
it was a pleasure to meet everyone, and yeah, Renouk, well
Yeah.
done, and really engaging conversation. So it's fun.
Yeah.
It brings back fun memories, and I think in so many ways, college tennis sets kind of a new life, right? New opportunities.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and good luck to you, Harsh, with all your stuff. I know you're doing a lot of stuff online right now. So yeah, and you coach as well. A lot of podcasts and stuff like that. I listen to them, by the way. So
Good.
yeah. All right, everyone. So thank you.
Bye.
Yeah,
Thank
have
you
a
so
good
much.
evening.
Thank you.
All right, take
Bye.
care. Okay, bye.
Bye.